heading via Zoom to someone who is born ready. Her name is Angela Vithoulkas. She's media guru and city councillor and everything else that goes along with it. Small business champion. Is that fair, Angela, if I hit you with all those titles?
I think, yes, I will take all those titles, but I'm sure there's lots of politicians of different colours who would probably resent some of those titles, but I will own them. You
own them, because that's the most important thing. You and I have promised each other a happier and a more progressive 21, because 20 did not happen. We're deleting it, and for those who thought they had a birthday, we go back to zero. We take one off. Something we can't take away at the moment is there's an inquiry in the Senate, and it's the big boys. I'm talking about some of those multinationals, players like Google, players like Facebook and others, and they're having not their day in the sun, but they're having their moment with the government at the moment. What do you make of it? What do you make of the battle?
Well, it's never pretty when someone has a dummy spit, but it's even more ugly when they're a global company and they know that they have intense advantages over everybody, including other search engines. So the government has rightly taken on board lots of complaints about giants like Google and Facebook, etc. And George, it's really important to point out here that there's two sides here. So the main side that Google is focusing on is the search engine situation of news. So the inquiry happening in government is the fact that there's a news media bargaining mandatory code that's being flexed, muscle being flexed at the moment, because the big news organisations are saying to Facebook and Google, you need to start paying us because you use our content. So regular people like me and you, George, might hop into the search engine on Google and want to find the latest news on what's happening with the airlines or COVID, for instance. And they would tap into the major news organisations and use their articles or their reporting to give us civilians the latest in what's happening. Now, the big people think that Google and Facebook should pay for it, and Google and Facebook have said, nah, bad luck. We're not going to.
Angela,
and that can react.
I love the fact that they've run their latest campaign, and their campaign is, we don't pinch anything. All we're doing is we're directing you. We're the international GPS commodity, and we set you on the path to succeed and get what you want. So we're driving business to your sites. And they've also had a hand at the mainstream media organisations, which they've decided are now decaying platforms, and we're giving you life. That's their argument. What have you made of that?
So the other side of that, and still to consider at the same time, while they say that we are helping you, we've got smaller news publishers who are also offended by what's happening because they are going to be affected. So the SMEs, the small businesses that will be affected, is the smaller publishers who don't actually invent news like the big organisations and simply cover or interpret it. And then there's the SMEs who actually use Google and pay for Google AdWords or Facebook advertising to try and lift the profile of their businesses. Now, that's where Google and Facebook make their money, but it's also wise to point out here that it's the big organisations outside of the news organisations who can afford to, let's say, manipulate or work with those algorithms and actually use their big dollar spend to jump on top of those small businesses. So there's a lot of unfairness going around, George, and really the only winners here is always going to be Google and Facebook. Now, the empty threat of them leaving Australia, well, we all know that that's just, like I said, it's not pretty when you have a dummy spit, but it's even more ugly when you leave.
I also noticed that the New South Wales government keeping itself busy, not only attending to all the COVID outbreaks and everything else that they need to do. They need to get tourism up and running, but they're also working very hard to try and get payments to small and medium businesses sped up, and they're also trying to entice big business to pay a little bit faster. Now, can I just take you back 100 years ago? My father used to have 2 or 3 service stations in Sydney, And it was imperative that when he needed fuel to be delivered, he would get the tankers to come on site. And you know what? He had customers that demanded 30 days credit, 60 days credit, and they'd stretch it to 90 and 120 days. Guess what the big oil companies demanded of all those dealers and proprietors? Cash.
Probably COD.
Cash on delivery. We don't drop and fill those tanks until you pay us cash. So that was an uneven world 50 years ago. What's improved?
So the difference here to point out is that New South Wales is trialling a new payments system, not only where the government itself pays small businesses faster. That's been around for a little while, and most states around Australia are actually jumping in or jumping on board on that method now for quite some time, although they've ramped it up this year.
Good.
The big difference here is where the New South Wales government is insisting that large organisations pay their small businesses and their subcontractors within 20 days. Now, what I want to point out here, George, is that system has been rorted for decades, because when government employs a big contractor, for instance, let's say, building infrastructure, laying down roads, building tunnels, maybe even light rail occasionally, the big organisations contract directly to government. Now, they then in turn take on subbies and small businesses. And what they've done in the past is that they've gotten their money from government very quickly, but they rarely pass that advantage on to the subcontractors and small businesses. In fact, the Phoenix system is based on that, where they take money, they go broke, and therefore the subbies don't get paid. So the wonderful thing here is that the New South government is insisting that these big organisations that contract to government actually do pay their subbies and the SMEs within 20 days. Yahoo, we're hoping that will eventually spread right around the nation, so that small businesses, particularly those subcontractors, are paid immediately, and those organisations that aren't playing fair do.
I can tell you, if that filters through and runs across Australia as it should, that'd be a tremendous boon for all those small and medium-sized businesses who are struggling and have been struggling for years. No, fantastic. All right, before we go, a little bit of not so serious stuff. What do you got for me?
Well, in case you don't know how to be happy, it's okay, because there's a prominent university in the US, Yale University, that offers you a course. It's a 10-week course, and it teaches you, it's science-based, George.
Is it free?
It's free.
Oh, now I'm happy. Yeah, go on.
You can learn within 10 weeks how to be happy. Now, it's science-based, it's free. 1 in 4 students in the US at Yale University are doing this course. It's one of their most popular courses. And in fact, 3 million people right around the world have done it so far. So you can log into Yale University, sign up for this course. It's run by prominent psychologists, and it teaches you all about increasing your own happiness so you can build more productive habits. That's called discipline, where I learned at my unofficial university in small business. You know, be productive, be efficient, you'll be happy because you won't be stressed. But COVID has really hit all of us hard in the last 18 months. And I know that you and I, we're discounting 2020, but nevertheless, it did happen for some.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to deal with it, sign up to this free course, 10 weeks, and you'll graduate. I'm not sure with what qualification, but you'll come back happy.
And not only that, this is more evidence. I've told you this before. I've been a great believer that in life, to progress, to go forward, to be a winner or to feel like a winner, attitude is key. So if we can make it a happy, positive attitude.
If you've got a sucky attitude, you're already a loser. So face on the positive.
Okay. Born to be a success. Angela Vithoulkas, thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye. Bye. Angela Vithoulkas on The Informer. Telling it like it is.